and we'd love to, I think, help this place come alive for us, for a better understanding of the Quaker worship, and how it happened over the last, 350 years or so, and even up until today. So this is just a very brief introduction. We have Carol Ann Neville here today, who is going to talk to us about the Quaker worship today, really, and some history, giving us a sense of the context of this building and who came. And then we have John Patel, who is a timber frame restorationist in the Hudson Valley. I think he's probably done numbers of barns, right? Well, and 18th century timber frame.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Meeting house.
Okay. Okay. So, there's lots to see here. You can pick out the pointers within the building. And as he said, an amateur historian, because all of this leads you into historic interest. Let's start searching. And I'm just going to point this out. It's sort of neither here nor there right now for everyone, but Robert had found this online. It's the meeting minutes, the monthly meeting minutes for the Nine Partners Meeting House, which is here where we are sitting today. And it dates from 1769 to 1779. So it's the eve of the American Revolution and then following it. And it's, short excerpts of each monthly meeting and the sorts of issues that they were looking at and the people who they were scrutinizing. But it gives a full flavor of life back then, right here, and the families. It's all the family names that we start to know and become familiar with from around here. So anyway, with that, I'm going to introduce the speakers. Let Carol in.
Carol Lambert, this makes it out like it when it's sort of something. Anyway, I'm Carol Lambert, as was mentioned. I am not a professional speaker. I'm nervous, but I don't mind sharing. My father said to my mother one time when I was about 7, Jean, was she vaccinated with a phonograph needle? Because she just doesn't shut up. so I do talk, but not usually on a specific subject. I usually just express my own opinions. But I am on the Historic Society board, and I do attend Quaker meetings from time to time and have been somewhat familiar with them for 40, 50 years. From my time in opposition to the Vietnam War, I was in Philadelphia, and the Society of Friends always has been, is opposed to war. And my then husband was a conscientious objector, so we were working with them in just learning things. Anyway, but the other thing is there's other Quakers here who are more Quaker than me. They're more Quaker. I'm Quakerish. I'm Quaker-like. But there are other Quakers who are bona fide birthright Quakers, I believe. Yeah. Jonathan there.
I'm birthright.
Karen is. I don't know if there's others. So if I make a mistake, correct me, please. But do it gently. Anyhow, so the formation of the Society of Friends started in England, as so many other kind of schisms or whatever you say did. At the time, this was like in the middle of the 17th century. A man named George Fox, among others, was really dissatisfied with what was going on in England, with the Church of England at that time. And what was going on is the Church of England had elaborate, spectacular cathedrals and churches and rituals, and people were garbed in big things, big clothes, and in addition to that, there was a lot of corruption. People were being charged to receive sacraments or blessings, and the other group of religious people at that time were the Puritans, and the puritanical way was kind of rigid and mean, sort of. Although I hope I'm not offending anyone, but anyway. Yeah, this is spattered with some of my opinions, some of my experience, and some facts. So anyway, so George Fox was kind of wandering around wondering what could he do, if anything, to find a better way to worship God. And he, as others have attested to, he felt he heard Jesus speaking to him. And, Jesus was saying, I am here, I'm here. And what was the profound thing to him, he realized he could directly be in touch with the divine. He didn't need a pastor or a priest. He didn't need to pay for any of this. That of God was within him, and he was good. And that was also, that flew in the face of a lot of thinking at that time. People were considered bad, kind of inherently not so good. They really needed to work to be good. But he kind of took a different approach and decided that people were kind of inherently good. And what to do about that, he thought that the other thing he felt was there was a lot to do with the community, that there needed to be people, like-minded people that could worship similarly, not just, the up there people. And he also believed strongly that it wasn't, religion was not a church, it was not a building, it was the people and the community and the sense of God and respect for a divine heart within you. And so he wound up coming here to the United States. In 16, I'm not good with dates, but you can find that specific date. He came here to these shores, and they were not, the Quakers were not well received in a lot of this country, because they would not take oaths, and they still don't take oaths in courtrooms. And the belief of that is, the reason for that is, the thinking was if you take an oath in a courtroom, it's suggesting that you've been lying all the other time, or that you might be. And one of the fundamental tenets that the Quakers hold to is integrity and truth and honesty. In fact, one of the interesting things that happened in England was that at the time, like again, mid-17th century, the way that people purchased things, the way the merchants worked was you always kind of bargained. They'd say a price, you'd say a lower price, they'd say a little bit lower price, and you'd go back and forth. And a lot of Quakers decided that was really weird, that it wasn't just, here's how much this costs. And so, what I read anyway, which is probably, maybe anecdotal, I don't know, but was that it became really kind of part and parcel of the society of friends, that they could be trusted, that you weren't going to have to be tricked or be smart, that this is what it was worth. And so that, there's a pretty fundamental improvement in working, or creating businesses. So that was happening. Anyway, they came to Long Island. As I said, they weren't well received in some of the states. They were really well received in Rhode Island, not Vermont. They were persecuted, put to death. That was not that uncommon. It was, again, as I said, they wouldn't take oaths. And they were actually called friends. George Fox called them friends, and he lifted this from the Bible, John 15, 12 through 15, I think, and it says, that's the part where it talks about, love, an intense sense of love, and that people, what is said in John is that you are no longer my servant. You are my friend. You don't have to, a servant does not know his master's business, but I share with you everything. I share all my business. I share honestly with integrity what's going on. And that was, in the Bible, that's what the reference is, and therefore you are my friend. So that was what they called themselves, was friends. But apparently, who knows how this happened, but apparently they were some people would witness them kind of shivering in delight or whatever when they would worship. And they would worship in silence largely. But that's not 100% true. I'll talk about that in a minute. And, okay, one of the cool things I liked anyway reading this was, and I knew this because I grew up in Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia. But William Penn was a Quaker. And William Penn had, was kind of the only, guy of big renown at that time who really dealt with the Native Americans, with the indigenous people. He dealt with them fairly and safely. And later, Voltaire said, the only treaty that was never broken between the whites and the indigenous people was William Penn's. It was never broken, and it was never sworn to either. There was no oath made or raising of hands. It was just, William Penn saying the truth. And later, this particular model for how people had the right to be honored, respected, and treated fairly, that became the model to be went for the Constitution. I mean, it's, it refers to God-given rights, both fundamental within people, like there's, the divine. And so that became part of the model for that. Okay, comes along, here they are in Dutchess, and they were first worshiping, when I say that, the Quakers that were in this area were worshiping with people, people in Purchase, there were meeting houses around. This was the most densely populated Quaker region anywhere in this particular area. So this building was built in 1780, bingo. This was built in 1780, this particular building, but there had been a log space for worship prior to that, which was building 5. And so the first building for worship here was in 1760. So what's funny about settling on brick was obviously if you have 2 fires and everything's gone, well, that's not smart. I mean, let's try something else. So they went with brick, but this particular building was considered particularly ostentatious. Really gaudy, over the top. Too much money was spent. It was not like all that cool, which kind of set the tone for Millbrook. Slap my face, I'm sorry. Anyhow, so that's happening. And then, I told you about friends. So time goes on and the Quakers are here practicing. And by the way, the Thorns, the original Thorn family, they were Quaker. A lot of the names that you all know around here, the roads that are named, they're Quakers. One of the other things that happened with this group of Quakers that I read was that they became, again, unlike other Quakers, they became very much invested in businesses and went to Poughkeepsie where there was better, they could get on the river and move things around. But because of their honesty and integrity, they were business booming kind of. So that was. So okay, things are going on. They built a school, and it was the first co-educational school in the country. And the people who attended that school, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony's father, they became people who made big changes in this country. The other thing the Quakers did, and this is kind of over time in England, again, because of their fundamental belief of that of God in everyone, prisoners were not shunned and hated. Mentally ill were not shunned and hated. Women, people of color, people were considered equal. And so, the Quakers also really believed ardently in putting into practice the belief. It's not a building you go to. It's not, prayers you say, a ritual, and then you go home. It's what makes the world better? How can I make the world an inch better? And so there's a lot of, still, that's a whole big part of what people do. It's action, it's not just prayers. And I don't mean to offend anyone. Other religions have action too, like I'm aware. I was raised Catholic. Anyway, let's see. So currently, let me do a little cover. Currently, there are kind of 6 Karen testimonies, the peace testimony?
I guess.
So the peace testimony was drafted in the 1600s, way before the Quakers came here. And it was presented to Charles II because the Quakers wanted to let the folks know, this is what we're about. You know, we're about peace. This is what we believe in. So there's the 6 things have the anagram of spices. It just helps me. I mean, otherwise it's sort of silly, but simplicity is a fundamental thing. And hence you always see the kind of comic appearance of a Quaker is in very rigid dress and all that, but that's no longer true. I mean, Quakers are still simple. There's no need for ostentation. People wear simple clothing and that. Simple prayer, simple worship. The peace testimony, the 3rd letter I is for integrity and truth, which again obviously leads to you don't have to swear or take an oath in court because you will always be speaking the truth. The C is for community because the spirit, if you ever go to a Quaker meeting, and anybody who wants to, I'll go with you if you want. Later. But people sit. The meeting I attend is called an unprogrammed meeting, and that's what this was unprogrammed. People sit in more or less a circle, but pews aren't round, so they're still a gathering that faces each other, and meditate, or pray in silence, so they're quiet. If they are moved by the Spirit, if something feels so that any individual in the room, and anyone can speak, there's no minister, there's no pastor in the unprogrammed meetings, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Anyone can stand up or speak and say what's happening, what they think, what they feel, what's happening. And it's not, nobody will oppose them. It doesn't become a debate. It's people are left to hear it, kind of spiritually digest it, respect it, and then people may not agree with it necessarily. I disagree, nobody disagrees. It's kind of more polite than that. There are also, and for a long time ago, programmed meetings. And the current worship in this place has become a programmed meeting where the person who kind of organizes it, his name is Tommy, and he was a long-time Quaker. And he was up at Bull's Head meeting for a while. He's been in the area. People, not that many people come, but people sing hymns, and he will read scripture, or others will choose scripture. And Louise attends this fairly regularly. Am I describing it accurately? And then there's a meditation time, there's quiet. And this is under the auspices of Lyle Church. Lyle Church was originally formed, was a federation back in 1910, 15. The religions in this area were dwindling, populations were getting smaller and smaller. So the Methodists didn't have many people, the Quakers didn't have many active people, and the Dutch Reformed didn't have many active people. And so those 3 unlikely religions formed a federation of sorts, and people would worship in that building. But it was more a traditional Protestant method of worship. And that's, as I said, I was affiliated with the Quakers when I was quite a bit younger. And then when I had my children, was living here in Millbrook, I joined Federated Church as a Quaker. That was what you would want to affiliate with one of the then designated things. And so my kids grew up in Quaker senses, and they went to Quaker retreats with Karen would drive them sometimes. And that impacts their lives a great deal still today. I mean, one's in California, and he finds Quaker meetings from time to time to attend. What else? I told you, Quaker worship, Quaker testimonies. What are the little things? About the mentally ill people. The Quakers, unfortunately, even though they theoretically believed everybody was equal, there were Quakers who did have slaves. Not many, but a few. And, it still was a mess. One of the things that would happen as time went on, or even still today, I'm not sure about this, when people were kind of in contradiction to right thinking or true, honest, sincere philosophy, if they were drinking, or if they were hurting their spouse. Or like one reference is, well, maybe some of you will go online and read those minutes from the meeting. I don't know. It's very dense, and it's kind of, the language is a bit archaic. But that's all stored at Swarthmore College outside Philadelphia, which is, they're storing all the archival information from, I guess, over the country, or maybe certainly the East Coast. But anyway, it's cool to read, but it says things like, so-and-so was betting on the horses. He will be put under the care of, Nancy and John. They'll take care of him. And now that didn't mean they were getting taken out to the woodshed. That wasn't happening. But they would, the people would get together with this guy and kind of try to steer him in the right direction. So, there were things you could do that were wrong: hurting your spouse, drinking, gambling, horse racing. One referred to dropping the bastard child. Don't drop your bastard child. That got put in trouble. He got in trouble. Anyway, and having a baby too early, too soon after marriage. If a child's born too soon after marriage, people wanted to talk to you about that. So you're going to hear.
Noted in here.
Yeah, you're going to
too soon after the
too soon. That's right.
We're sending someone out to talk.
What else do I want to tell you? I don't know. I mean, you're going to hear a whole bunch of stuff about the physical structure now, and that was what was kind of the guts and heart of what was going on. Questions? Should I ask any questions now?
Well, I'm just thinking, I could be wrong, but weren't they instrumental in running the Underground Railroad?
Oh, yeah, that too. Right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the Underground Railroad.
Right through here.
Yeah.
To our town.
Yeah. In fact, we were at the market, the farmer's market today. Somebody was talking about their house that has, behind the fireplace, there was a room that was part of the Underground Railroad. But probably.
Yeah, I mean, I would just caution people about getting too excited about the Underground Railroad.
Okay.
I mean, one way to think of it is that slavery was legal in New York for a longer time period than it's been illegal in New York, right? Although it's close. And so it's much more likely that people's property is associated with the owning of slaves than it's associated with opposition to slavery, right? Just logically, that's true. That said, Quakers are the first white people in America to be outspoken abolitionists.
Right.
And certainly they were involved in anti-slavery activity in the Underground Railroad. And really in Dutchess County, there's kind of two prongs of that. There's the escape up the river, and so there's Underground Railroad sites in Poughkeepsie and Beacon, places like that. And then there's the kind of Quaker communities in the eastern part of the county, like Pauling, Millbrook's more central, Dutchess County, and the same idea. And so it's just, I mean, I think everyone knows this logically, but like, it was all secretive, meant to be secretive. So like, from a historian's perspective, it's just really, really hard to document any of that stuff. And I would say that finding a space in your house that seems like it was a hiding space should not be taken as persuasive evidence that the person who lived in that house was involved in the Underground Railroad, because people have a dozen reasons to hide stuff in their house. Like, it's not always about, people trying to escape from slavery. But yes, there certainly were at times the slaves who were escaping through this region and had help from Quakers who lived here. But hard to document, hard to know the numbers, hard to know like the specific sites or anything like that.
I just want to add something that I'm learning, so I'm not coming at it from a Quaker, being Quaker knowledgeable, but I'm learning from Karen and Carol Ann about something that is called the queries. And you two can explain that much better, I'm sure. But just very simply, what I'm learning is that the Quakers have a listing of queries that are something to think about. They're questions to consider. and think about, and maybe introduce at the beginning of a meeting, right? One or possibly more. And what I found in reading these minutes is that they go, and the queries were read, and then they have a list. Sometimes it was just 3 that were answered, 3 queries that were answered. And sometimes it's, one of these lists is 20 of them were answered. And it's not that the whole question is written out, because it's something that's, it's the query that's written up in a book. And those queries can change over time as life evolves and issues evolve, and so they're still continuing to change to this day. One of them is about, like number 3 seems to be love and unity, because they, at the end of a meeting, they would comment on, we have love and unity among us, or maybe it's not as much as we would like. They always have a different aspect of it each month. They comment on it. But another one I just read today was about the purchase, we were reading it, about the purchase of black people. And so in 1770, they had that as a query to consider among us what you think about this purchase. Yes, and you have to correct me if I'm putting it the wrong way, but it was making an awareness then among the, the group to consider. Yeah, or maybe should or shouldn't, right? But it was up to them to start to absorb that question and understand it. And that was 1770, so that's
And the other thing, I mean, Quakers decide things by consensus. Is that the word, or is it different? Generally, I mean,
do you want me to actually answer that? It looks like consensus. It's often talked about as consensus. It looks like consensus sort of from the outside of the process. When it's done properly, what it actually is not a meeting of the minds and an agreement from headspace. It's we have all discerned together what it is that God wants us to do. And it's called sense of the meeting.
and that's also, it's not just in worship that people do that, that's also the way the business meetings are conducted, I think, right?
It's only in business meetings.
Oh, okay.
Reaching the sense of the meeting is how the business is conducted, and the minutes that would be written down are, we have reached this discernment, we reached the sense of the meeting, here it is, we're writing it down.
And speaking of business meetings, the other thing is, the meetings, because women were considered equal, and they were the ministers, with whatever. Anyway, they were equal, but during business meetings, the women and men met separately. And the first back of those is something about the minutes from men's meeting, I think, that's the first one.
okay.
As I've come to understand it, the reason for that is because even though theoretically women were equal, it was easy they didn't want married people to be in contradiction in public, so that women could have their opinion and express it, and men could have their opinion and express it, and that nobody was kind of stepping on each other's toes. Good idea.
Should we turn things over to John and talk a little bit about the architecture?
Thank you, Caroline. That was wonderful.
And I just spent maybe the past 25 or 30 years working on old barns or old timber structures, not new barns, not new timber structures. Trying to preserve the stories, which is why I'm here. So what I'd like to do is give you some kind of, can everyone hear me? I'm not a public speaker, so I got to test myself. Give you some idea of what this place is made of, and how it was made, and how it was put up. And I have to say, it is a gem. Someone else said that, I totally agree. This is a magnificent building to display, and it's never been painted. There's no wiring holes, and there's no plumbing holes. It's just the way it was in 1780, except for the graffiti on the benches, which I guess is what they did. scribe rule timber frame building, which is to say that each of these mortise and tenon posts that rise up into the beams, each one is not interchangeable with its neighbor. They're cut for that, and that, and that, and let's see here, all across the front here, if you look, there's number 2, chopped with a chisel, there's number 1, chopped with a chisel, 3, 4, on down the line. A chisel was the easiest way to mark a timber because you can do it in Roman numerals and straight lines. You can add a V if you need it. No, that's good.
It's at the top of the column.
Yes. So every one of them is identified with its mortise in that beam. And they would have had to put this whole structure up before they could put the bricks up.
Oh, wow.
Because there's no place to work. The way this is done is these timbers are erected in vents. So this, I'm losing these zappers into the wall and I can't see it. Generally speaking, you take a vent with 2 posts and a tie in, and then on a sill plate, you stand it up, and it's all assembled. And then you stand the next one up behind it, and so on and so forth until you have a complete building. A lot of the pieces in between horizontally can't be added after everything is up, because they're, by nature, the tenon, if I were to put a girth between this post and that post, the tenon's going to be 3 inches in here and 3 inches in there, and there's 6 inches that you just can't work with. Quite how they did that in here, I'm not sure. The roof also would have to have gone on before all of this to protect what they'd already done from the weather. And whether they had completed the flooring or not, I don't know. But they needed the frame first, the roof frame next, then the roof would have to have been covered, and then they could put the brick walls up. I could be wrong about this, but that's my conjecture. As far as the brickwork goes, I've read a couple of accounts, and I think sometimes these accounts get handed down from one source to another without being verified, and a mistake can be passed along too. But I've read where it was speculated that it took so long to build this because the bricklayers were amateurs. So when you leave here, you go out the door, throw your eyeball down any one of these walls really close like this, it's as straight as an arrow. The long walls too. And look at the coursing on the bricks, straight as an arrow. None of this, they weren't amateurs. They could not have been amateurs. So that's what they built the outside with. The brick bonding on the front is Flemish bond. The rest of it is common bond. I don't know why. They liked the looks of Flemish bond for the front door more and decided common bond was good enough for the rest of the place. But the walls are 2 foot thick. The brick was dug, at least, I don't know where it was burned, right over here on Altamont Road, very close by. Not a necessity. You don't want to carry bricks too far. The windows, this really interests me. The window frames and sash are supposedly cypress. Not supposedly, I'll take their word for that. I really question that since cypress doesn't grow here. But it seems that it does grow as far north as Delaware. So it could have come up the Hudson River as part of the coastal trade and then overland here. But even at that time, it must have been pretty expensive to get cypress from Delaware when you've got white pine all over Dutchess County. And white pine would have been the preferred softwood for that kind of trim work and window work. Don't know. The roof structure is the one thing that really, it bothers me here because I don't have any way of even really verbally explaining it. I would get tongue-tied. I would describe it as major minor rafter with cane posts. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay. It was only until it was last week, I guess, there's a scuttle hole leading up into the attic over in that corner. And Brad managed to get up there with a phone and a camera. I got my head up there. I was not nimble enough to get the rest of me up there in the dark, and I'm not familiar with the cell phone, and I'm trying to hold the flat rock on a phone that I don't understand, and it's fascinating. Brad got up in there and took a series of photographs. I've got blow-ups up in here with me. I'll pass that around in time. But it's a type of frame that, as far as I know, would have been kind of outdated by 1780, even for a roof this size, and it still stands. I've read some accounts called the brick walls load-bearing, but from the I didn't think this was so. From the photographs, you can see where these rafters, these huge rafters, are planted on the top plate, the frame, the wooden frame, not on the brick. So, others have not gone up there. It's a little bit hard for me to understand. In 1935 and 6, the Department of the Interior did a big investigation here. They came up with beautiful drawings, architectural drawings, and the ones of that era, they're really sweet the way they're drawn and elaborate. They're works of art in and of themselves. And they've got hinges and windows and sash. And there's a side profile from that, and it's got two triangular lines like this, and it says roof. And I took that and said, well, that's the way it is until we got up there. I don't know how they came to this stuff. If you look at the floorboards here, these are forged nails. This is before the era of the cut nail even. So these were all made by a local blacksmith. And if you catch the light, here's a board for instance. If you get a good cross light, you'll see that there's these up and down striations. And what that tells you, as soon as you look at it, this is an up and down sawmill. Bigger pieces of the building will work with an axe. They planed this as well. But the smaller work could be sawn. There's some right there where that knot isn't as hard and the saw skipped a bit. And it's all through here. You can find it all over the place. Yes. Circular saws didn't come around until it was a sister, a shaker's sister, who invented the circular saw, but nobody was using them until the late 19th century because it's really hard to get a piece of steel of any size like that, handmade and balanced to spin at any kind of speed. So these were up and down saws that were water powered. I think, I can't swear to this, I've seen this flooring called yellow pine, I think, not because yellow pine would look similar to this, but it comes from the south. And why would you have your flooring shipped up from Georgia when you've got red pine, which looks like this in New York? It's harder than white pine, it wears better, it's more resinous. So I think they got that wrong too. The posts seem to me to be chestnut. And that would make good sense because chestnut was primary wood in these forests. It was readily available, easy to work, rot resistant, jack of all trades. It does not look like white oak to me, which would be the other candidate. It looks like chestnut. If there were white oak in here, I could show it to you. So this is almost a process of elimination, but I like the way that the grain looks in this wall. I'm going to go chestnut on that. I'm not really sure about those beams. I'm just not sure, and so I don't want to put my foot in my mouth and prove them wrong. If you look at some of the tops of these posts, right here, where I'm standing, I can see the size of the tenon that's going up into that mortise. It's a 2-inch tenon. And then pegged, that's for the sake of erection. Once the thing's up there, you don't need the peg. But while you're putting it up there, it holds it together. I think that the rest of the pine work in here is probably white pine. White pine, eastern white pine oxidizes over time, partly due to ultraviolet light and oxidation, and they call it pumpkin pine. Sometimes it turns to a nice rich orange. This is rich orange to me. The only embellishment that I see in here, and this is debatable as embellishment, is the chamfering on these posts. I've got one report here that says the posts were round, but they're not. They're chamfered. I don't understand, but they're chamfered, and it's true that it's prettier and you don't get hurt bumping against it. But I don't know if this was known at that time or not. But when they built large timber frame mills in New England, New York, Wappingers like that, they mandated chamfering the posts because they burn slower if there's a fire. A square corner as opposed to this corner, square corner is going to catch a lot faster. This would resist it more. They also beaded a lot of their woodwork, and that's really the only ornamentation. What am I seeing? Okay, look at the casing on the windows over here. That little. Okay, you got some. There's beading up there. That's the most common thing to do to the edge of a board if you want it to look something less than flat. Put a bead on it. I do. That seems to be the extent of it. There's no filigree work, there's no fancy molding, very Quakerish. But they did go that far. Benches you're sitting on, they're all framed right out the same way. Gracefully made, but you won't get hurt bumping into anything here. It won't tip over. And it's white pine and it's easy to carve. This back door here, which when I first saw that, I thought, oh, they must have had a stairway here, but that's a carriage entrance. And so the person could step from the carriage from that height without going down to the ground. These panels here operate like window sash. You can see the 2x4 pieces there that are jacking up. If they could, that's how they would lower, they would drop those sash, lower them, and then that would isolate the two sections, whoever is on which side. So that's another interesting feature in here. Again, some beading on that. And all the joint work, there's no gaps. It's so well crafted. It's another interesting thing that they did. Well, you can see what one aspect of it is on the other room where there's a ceiling. And you can do the same thing here by taking the rafter pieces of the thing, or floor joists, I guess you call them. They would run them through these notches above, and the mortise and tenon into that beam there. These are about 2x6. There's one of them laying on the floor upstairs. And then they lay planking over it. They can do a ceiling. And if you didn't have 1,000 people in here, that'd keep the 500 from down here a little bit warm. Any questions?
Is the ceiling original? Is the ceiling original?
wouldn't last, blind plaster. You can get gypsum plaster around here at the Erie Canal.
When you say it was 2 feet thick, is that 2 feet of bricks, like row after row after row of bricks?
I think that there's a number written by someone that are 22.5 inches around that wall, 2 foot. And then plastered upon that. Beneath this, yes. That's a good question. I can't see that. That oil, and that's why I dodged that.
Okay.
I can't prove these in way, so. I don't mean to be evasive, but I don't have an honest answer to that. Glass? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And yes. You stand in certain spots and you look like this is me in an old house, an old building like this. And some of these panes of glass have been replaced. And some of them obviously have it, and they're weighty and bubbled and spangled and all sorts of glass flaws from making glass in the 18th century. That's original stuff, the gems. Every one of those pieces of glass has to be treated like a diamond in Korea.
Do you think that glass would have been, was it made in another larger center someplace and brought here, or did they make things, panes of glass?
I don't know when glass making began here. I know Glasgow across the river, north of Ulster. That's why it's called Glasgow. They were manufacturing glass there. In the very early days of the colonies, it was shipped from England because they didn't make glass here, and it was extremely valuable. So you look at places like old houses on Nantucket, and few windows. It was a precious commodity. At this time, somebody had to have a source of a lot of glass.
Across the river at Senate House, they always talk about using the glass bottles. Like a, wine or a rum bottle or something. Yeah, they just
They do blow bullseye glass too. Glass blower can do that. So maybe decoratively over the door on old houses, you'll see these things that you couldn't really focus on. But they'll like light.
Yeah, and maybe that was just their story, I don't know. So the roof line then, in 1780, this design of roof was outdated, possibly. What did they use it for? What was this roof design used for? Barns?
Barns, major barns. No, you could find these in barns. I looked through everything I had on barns, on old barns, and I couldn't find anybody that had anything on a cane post in the barn. There's very little about that. The cane post rises straight up to the center of the roof, right up there to the apex. And then it's got two massive rafters dropping down to the plates on the outside. I'm misoriented here. The plates on the outside of the building. That's the fundamental part. There's a pair of struts. All of this is hand hewn. It's all axe work. And there's a pair of struts that go on an angle from the king post and connect to the principal rafter to stiffen. So the weight of the principal rafter would be coming this way, and those struts are fighting that. After that, they put these huge purlins. A purlin is a piece that runs parallel to the ridge line. So between each major rafter, there's a purlin mortised into that. And then the minor rafters, which are smaller in gauge, there's a pair of them between each major rafter that come to the purlin and stop, and then another pair that continue that line to the ridge. When they get to the ridge, and the major rafters met and joined on the king post. The minor rafters are joined together by slotting them and pegging them. This is evident in these photographs. I think it's going to be a more in-depth exploration of this. I don't have measurements on this or anything of that nature, and that's what I really want to get.
So it doesn't sound like there's any storage up there.
No floor up there. There's no flooring. It's a little bit of decking right around the scuttle hole, and it's all you see is plaster and lath. Make the wrong step when you're downstairs.
Can you put up on the website, the Historic Society's website, photos?
Wait, would you give me that from the beginning again, please?
Can you put those photos, can you give them to Robert? Copies of them, and the images could be put up on the...
Yes, Brad, he took them, he's the man.
You can send them to Robert? Okay.
I think you're giving me too much credit in terms of my technical knowledge of how to put stuff on the website.
Yeah, those are techie.
Wait a minute.
This business constitutes everything I've been able to find on this. And I'll pass it around. In the back, you're free to look at anything in here. The photographs are at the end of it. And here you can see, if you take your time and you look at them, you kind of get the picture of what went on over there.
I'm going to ask you a question. Would they have, like nowadays you hire a GC and the GC gets the subcontractors. Is there any information about who were the people that built this?
Not that I found. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. The craftsmanship in here is really good. Everything's straight, true, plumb, level. Everything you want to criticize about it's there. It meets all the critiques.
And that's 200 right, where they made years ago.
Yes.
It's stable, so stable.
Through all kinds of weather. Building through all kinds of weather.
Yeah.
My best guess would be white cedar shingles, because at that time, very strong pressure frame, the one that I think might have brought up site or something, frame. The New Jersey shore has areas that grow white cedar prolifically, so they would harvest that for shingles, cut it down there into bundles, and then they bring it up the Hudson River, and then the same boat would go back down to Manhattan with hay or apples or rum or some other shrub. And that was a constant shuttle like that. But you didn't get maybe 30 years out of that. Yes,
What is that?
Stairway?
Is that a stairway?
yes. Yeah, that's the underside of the stairway.
Yeah, but where, did it go outside?
Oh, no, that's to get upstairs here. Right over us. They kind of chained that off today, and I can understand why, because the lighting is not good up there.
You pick it up outside here.
No, right from the vestibule.
Oh, it is from the vestibule, okay.
You can see as you leave, the chain door upstairs, there are doors up there that can close it off too.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes, can I make a quick programming announcement before everybody departs? Some short-term planning and long-term planning. 2 weeks from today, which I think is August 3rd, is our next summer program. Wayne Lemke is kind of continuing his series of programs about lost buildings of Millbrook. And so he's going to focus on the Millbrook Hotel, which is pretty much where the fire station is now, right across from where the old train station was. And then the Millbrook Inn, which was about 100 yards or so away from that. It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition because the Millbrook Hotel was more like a local place, there was a bar there, and the Millbrook Inn was built for kind of well-heeled New Yorkers who were coming up to stay and maybe visiting friends. And so both gone now, but it's kind of an interesting comparison. That's 2 weeks from today, August 3rd, and
meeting pretty much where the firehouse is, right down there. We'll walk around a little. And then Allison mentioned that in 1770, the Quakers who worshipped here, although not in this building at that point, were starting to have discussions about the morality of slavery. And so there's this incredible document, 10 pages long, all handwritten, from 1775, where it's no longer a question of kind of personal morality for the Quaker community. They make a decision as a community that we're not going to have slaves anymore. And if you want to be part of this community, that's a requirement. And so the slaves that who still exist at this point in this community are manumitted. And it's this incredible document because it talks about this in very kind of moral terms, and the language of it is very interesting. And so we thought, 1775, so next year is the 250th anniversary of that. So we should have a program kind of commemorating that at some point next year. So that's as far as we've got. So we've got an event 2 weeks from today, and then we've got an event sometime in 2025 involving Quakers that plan on attending. I just want to thank Carol Ann and John. They did a great job. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer more questions if people want to, talk to them one-on-one individually, but thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah, there's one thing, if I could have your attention, just before everyone falls asleep or leaves. October, I think, 5th, in early October every year, the Winnicke Land Trust holds a barn tour. Usually somewhat around Red Hook, Rhinebeck, Milan, that area. And they round up a handful of old barns through the owners and organize a self-driving tour with a booklet, and then they get someone like me to stand there and explain things to people as they come. And at the last barn on the trip, and they always have a sort of a gala. They're making music, wine and cheese and food, and a celebration of sorts. I've been doing that for, 10 years or something like that, and I just wanted to put in a pitch for that. If you're interested in old barns, you can get to see some Jim Dandies there. You can go back to pre-1775, Dutch barns, and history galore. That's a nice trip.
One quick thing too.
Where? I think it's October 5th. I think that's what it is this year. And they're just starting organizing now. We're searching for sites to present.
I didn't mention this, but I wanted to. The adjacent cemetery, we did a tour. Yes.
I was going to ask that.
Last year, that was also part of there was a walk around through there, and we'll do that again sometime. But I just want to let people know, it is not a closed cemetery. It's not just for Quakers, and it's not full yet. So if you want to own land in Millbrook, you can get your hands on